everyone and welcome! If you missed our last big lore stream and if you'd like to watch it, you can watch it by going to our second YouTube channel. Yes, in case you didn't know, we do have a second channel where we can dump all the bloopers and highlights. That is Necrit 2 in case anyone is interested. And the reason why you might be interested is because on the last stream we achieved something no one has before. We went through all the major stories, we cross-referenced what Riot said, and we put together the ultimate League of Legends story timeline. The final product looks like this. And because it's not really that appealing, today I want to recreate it and put it into a better form. Just let me remind you that this timeline will not include every single champion, but it will give you enough information to let you know where that champion is if you know their story. Again, keep in mind that we used multiple Riot sources to put this together, and only the stories that are posted on Universe will affect the timeline. Everything else is outdated. So without further ado, let's go through the complete history of the League of Legends universe. At the very beginning of time, there was something referred to as Breath of Creation. We don't really know what caused it or how it even happened, but this spawned the first celestial gods into the empty spaces of our universe. Since there was very few of them, they floated through the empty spaces alone, rarely even encountering one another. One of these celestial gods is Aurelian Sol, a celestial dragon that fills the darkness around him with light using his own existential essence. That's how the stars were created. That is, unless you trust the aspect of Twilight, who's a known liar and a deceiver, but it says otherwise. We can assume that it was around this era that the Watchers and the Void also spawned into the empty spaces. That's why you can see Vel'Koz in front of you. Since we know that the Watchers are connected to the Void, it is very much possible that Vel'Koz is one of them. As the first stardust and planets settled in the universe, more of the lesser celestial beings spawned. Celestials such as Bard, Soraka, and perhaps even the aspects of Targon. Not the actual avatars we know, like Diana, Leona or Pantheon, but this might be when the essence of these aspects appeared. Life started evolving around the universe, and one such a planet was Runeterra. On Runeterra, the first demigods were born as they shaped the lands. These were Ornn, Volibear, Anivia and the legendary Seal Sister. Later, primitive life spread around, and with it we got the signs of the first demons and spirits. Creatures connected to the spiritual essence of Runeterra. Spirits like Nocturne, Tahm Kench and the oldest one we know, Evelynn, were born early. But all of them started as weak essences of spiritual energy. It wasn't until much later, after primitive life evolved, that these spirits learned how to acquire physical forms. Presumably, this evolution led into the creation of the first ancient Yordles. And to break one of the widespread misconceptions, one of these spirits was also Kindred, a dualistic spirit that preys upon the dying. Remember that they are not actual death, they have nothing to do with it. They are just a spirit roaming around the lands of today's Noxus. And while all of this was happening on Runeterra, the Darkin were already growing powerful on a different planet. Sometime later, the primitive life evolved into the first civilized humans. Eons passed and the Great Void War began. The Void became a growing threat to the universe as it consumed worlds. And as the first Void Rifts opened on Runeterra, the aspects of Targon possessed their first Runeterran champions in order to defend the planet. It was around this time that the Targonians, with the aspect of war known as Pantheon, enslaved Aurelian Sol, and used him as a weapon against the Void. Even though Targon was able to push back the horrible spawns of the Void invasion, the impact on Runeterra was drastic. Not only was Aurelian's power excessive, at times leveling mountains, drying rivers and burning canyons into the landscape in order to stop the Void, but even the ecosystem changed. This led into the mass evolution of life. During this era, two major events happened. In the north, the Watchers enslaved the Iceborn and the story of the Three Sisters took place, which includes Ornn building the bridge that sealed the Frozen Watchers, and here you have to remember that the Frozen Watchers are connected to the Void, and it was during these times that the story of a Freljordian warlord known as Ivern took place. The second major event was the mass migration of humans. As the Void Wars ravaged Valoran, many humans fled into the unknown corners of Ionia. During those times, Ionia had lands hidden from the eyes of the Void. These lands were filled with a race known as the Vastaya Shirei, a race of intelligent shapeshifting beings who were greatly in tune with the world's natural magics. These creatures welcomed the human refugees, and eventually they produced a new race known as the Vastaya. As the Great War was nearing its end, the Shuriman Empire was founded in the southern deserts of Valoran. Aurelian even describes how the Great Sun Disk was built, as he traveled to another void rift near Mount Targon. The Shuriman Empire used this disk to create the Ascended, god warriors fused with the celestial powers of the sun. Soon the Shuriman army had an entire host of these god warriors, with a mighty god warrior queen known as Setaka, wielding the legendary blade called Chalikar, a blade now carried by Sivir. Shurima was led by a single emperor, and not every desert city agreed that the empire has to conquer the entire world with an iron fist. Some cities even rebelled against the empire, no longer tolerating slavery and torture of their citizens. Icathia was one such a city, led by a powerful mage king. This is where the story of Icathia took place, and the void erupted on Runeterra again in full force. Here, the god queen Setaka was defeated. Time passed and Emperor Azir took on the Shuriman throne. This was followed by the story of Zerath, and the Shuriman Empire was ruined by his destructive arcane explosion. Years passed and civilized humans formed tribes around central Valoran, eventually spreading all across Runeterra once again. But just as humanity began to grow, the aftermath of Shurima's fall kicked in. The explosion was so powerful and so bright it shone like a beacon throughout the universe, eventually attracting the hunger of the Darkin and beginning the events of the Noxian Empire. This is when the Darkin first came in contact with humans. It is still unclear what has really happened, but it seems like the Darkin weren't hostile when they arrived. They might have even taught humans how to use their blood magic. But in time, humans turned on them, and the Darkin began their invasion on Runeterra. Ultimately, the Darkin were defeated by the remaining Ascended, and some of them were sealed by the new Ascended God Warrior Queen. Unfortunately, later she died as well. Shortly after that, the tribes formed in central Valoran. There was a tribe that was led by Mordekaiser, a brutal tyrant warlord so powerful he conquered lands far and wide. Eventually, he ordered the construction of the Immortal Bastion, an impenetrable fortress that hid the dark magic that secretly fueled him deep in its heart. This is when we heard about the Pale Lady, presumably LeBlanc, for the first time as well. She was there during Mordekaiser's reign. But as his conquest became more and more unstoppable, the surrounding barbarian tribes united and finally stopped his reign of terror. However, Mordekaiser's warlocks were able to resurrect him, and the terror continued. As long as they could recover his remains, they could do so. That's why one day a spy stole Mordekaiser's skull and hid it away from the warlocks, on an island known as the Blessed Isles. Thus he ended the era of Mordekaiser. Years passed and new leaders sat on the Noxian throne. It is unclear whether one of these leaders was the ruined king, but either way, this is when his story took place. He destroyed the Blessed Isles, turned them into the Shadow Isles. By doing this, he released all sorts of newly twisted creatures, and once again, he revealed Mordekaiser's skull. Even though LeBlanc was the one who manipulated most of these events, she managed to burn her name and her deeds from the Noxian history, leading into the most destructive era of all, the Rune Wars. The Rune Wars were a massive battle between two regions using mostly magic. The reason why this war was so dangerous was because during these times, humans truly started mastering magic for the first time in their history. Combine this with the fact that the mysterious world runes started appearing around Runeterra, giving it the name Rune Wars, and humans started releasing powerful spells beyond their own control, often leveling entire cities in a blink of an eye. This is where the story of Rise took place. But the events of Runeterra led into something greater, the discovery of Petricite. As a group of hopeless people fled from the havoc caused by magic, they found an ancient petrified forest. It seemed like all magic was ineffective in these strange woods. And as years passed, people figured out how to combine this enchanted wood with ash and lime to make Petricite. a stone-like material that absorbed magic, and a material they used to build a new kingdom, Demacia. The Rune Wars were also important for another city. As the magic turned lands upside down, desert explorers discovered strange new crystals deep under the sand. These crystals became known as hex crystals. They came from an ancient race of scorpions known as the Breckern. These crystals were harvested and brought back to Piltover by the Pharaoh's family, which we know as Camille's family, a Piltovan house that became rich and powerful because of them. Their engineers immediately started experimenting on these crystals, and they found out that they hold an irreplaceable source of energy. They held enough power to fuel replaced human organs, and potentially enhance human bodies. As trade in Piltover grew, the leaders of the city decided to dig a passage through the rocks below. This would connect the western and eastern seas, helping sailors arrive at their destinations months earlier. But the detonations that were planned to open a hole and create a river were too much. The explosion sunk half of the city, killing tens of thousands of the city's population. This is how the undercity known as Zone came to be. And because of these events, Jenna, the spirit of wind, grew in power. Of course, the creation of Zone unleashed a new uncontrolled black market that sold illegal weapons. Weapons that fueled the Noxian invasion of Ionia. This is a well-known event full of many different stories. During this time, Borem Darkwill was the Noxian leader, and Singed supplied him with chemical weapons. But before the invasion launched, there was one more story to remember. The story of Shen, Zed and Jin. After that, the invasion began and the stories of Kain, Yasuo, Talia, Riven, Master Yi and many others happened. This is also when Varus was resurrected. After the invasion, Swain sent Darkwill's bodyguard Urgot away into Zone, turning him into what he is now. He then killed Darkwill himself and started the Triforix. This is where we're getting into the current era. All the stories here are cramped up, so the timeline may not be perfectly accurate at times. But here is roughly how the events happened in order. Sivir led Cassiopeia into the tomb of the emperors and resurrected Azir. This revived the entire city, leading into the story of Talia. The last part of Varus' story takes place while the rest of the stories are going on. Then we have the stories of Victor, Jace and all the other Piltovans. At the same time, the Burning Tides is going on, followed by the Shadow and Fortune story involving Lucian and Ilawi. Then we have the Progress Day story preparing for another Noxian invasion. Then we have the Darius comic, or at least the parts that take place in present days. Then the massive story for Demacia. The story of Nami and Diana, together with the recent Misfortune comic. And then the stories of Rakan and Zaya and the corruption of Ionia. And lastly, we have the story of Kai'Sa. And this was the complete history of the universe of League of Legends. I'll try to upload this image somewhere so you can check it out for yourselves. Also, if you'd like to know when the stories of some specific champions happened, feel free to ask in the comments, and either me or someone else will answer it for you. But that's it for this video. So if you enjoyed it, feel free to like it and subscribe for more lore and news. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Discord if you'd like to chat. We stream pretty often, so feel free to follow us on Twitch too. Our merch and P.O. Box will be in the description. Of course, massive shout out to our patrons for going the extra mile. You guys are irreplaceable. And with that, thank you all so much for being here and for your support. You know I really appreciate it. And as always, thank you time again.